Yep, being live streamed. Woohoo! All
Waiting
right.
for it from
Hegel's
this
Philosophy of
end.
Nature, subsection 345, take one. But the plant, as organic, also essentially articulates itself into a variety of structures, some abstract, cells, fibers, and the like, and some more concrete, which, however, remain in their original homogeneity. The shape of the plant as not liberated out of individuality into subjectivity, is still closely related to geometrical forms and crystalline regularity, and the products of its processes are even more closely related to chemical products. Okay, so what does this mean? He throws down quite a gauntlet here.
Yeah,
So
so I guess I can go because I've read into this section a lot more. He starts to go like how many different parts of the plant seem to themselves can be considered an individual, so a part of the whole. Like you can cut off like, part of a banana tree and put it in the ground will basically be a clone of the original plant.
yes,
So I'm thinking that's like that part, like there's like the whole is in different parts of the part, which now I'm thinking back to the plant being in the whole of the seed. Now, I mean, has an extra meaning here too.
yeah,
Um,
yeah. It's funny because the, like people get confused when you start talking about uh, horticultural husbandry. So, do you plant seeds or do you transplant pieces of the plant to create, a cutting, right? And what's the difference between the two, so on and so forth. Well, the plant has its own reproductive system. The way that we do horticulture with cuttings and stuff, that's from the outside. That's not part of, that's not part of the plant's reproductive system. Both can be equally effective, in some cases, maybe more. But it's sort of interesting um, how that works. Um,
and so
yeah.
it's sort of a chemical process.
Point is everywhere present in the process and pervades it, and it is the ignorance of, rather the failure to recognize the simple identification as well as the simple diremption, which makes the physiology of the organism impossible. That's interesting. Physiology of the organism is impossible. Well, this is the age before microscopes and the what did he say? The abstract structure in the plant, like cells and fibers, are actually not so abstract now that we can see them under a microscope.
Um,
So the science has moved on, but I think his point remains the same that functionally the plant is still, you know,
I think it's also kind of how it is that there is kind of the whole of the plant is in its parts as well here. And so trying to divide it up by part doesn't still kind of, creates a dead conception of the plant. I'm also getting off of this.
yeah. Can you imagine writing a 2-volume treatment on plants? Man. Okay, so um, so there's a Zuzats here, and he says the objectification of the plant is wholly formal, is not a veritable objectivity. Not only does the plant outwardize itself simply as such, but itself is preserved as an individual only by a perennial posting of a fresh individual.
And here's where I mean this
Um,
is a long edition.
yeah. Um,
Like
okay.
part of it is the type of the whole plant. Yeah, it kind of interesting is just to give a forerunning because I don't know if you remember this part too, where it's like he goes through each part and it's like more and more evolved form, more complex form, and how they all still kind of interrelate to each other, or each of it still kind of got the whole and can in some form still exist after being cut off, or and maybe grafted onto a different spot.
Yeah,
Something animals can't do.
right. Yeah, and we talked about this before. In the higher plants, I'm just kind of reading through a little bit. In the higher plants,
Yeah.
especially in shrubs, the immediate growth occurs as a simultaneous division into twigs and branches. In the plant, we distinguish roots, stems, branches, and leaves, but there is no more familiar fact than that each branch and twig is a complete plant, which is its root in the plant as in the soil. If it is broken off from the plant and put as a slip into the ground, it puts out roots and is a complete plant. This also happens when branches are accidentally severed from the plant, so on and so forth. The branches grow from buds. From each bud, vessels are prolonged and go down through the plant so that the wood is strictly a product of the root fibers of all the buds, and the woody plant is an aggregate of number of growths. Blah 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 blah. He goes on into that. uh, he goes into the different farms. I'm starting to talk like an Irishman here. Bulbs too are such seed buds, and similarly divide themselves. You know what? I take back what I said about cuttings. If a tree falls in the forest, and all the branches fall off of it, the branches can become cuttings, perfectly natural. So it doesn't always require human intervention. So never mind. Hey. It's an interesting question too. So much. I know I'm going off the cuff here a little bit, but so much of how we talk about this stuff, talk about nature, is premised on the idea that if we get involved in the processes of nature, it's illegitimate somehow. Which Spinoza would have words with me about. He would say, "Your nature is all encompassing. There's nothing outside of it, right? Including us."
Ugh.
We are natural, and it's like saying if a lightning bolt hits a tree and the tree falls, that's illegitimate because that comes from outside of the tree. Of course, that's a nonsense phrase, but somehow we say if a human cuts down the tree, that wasn't a natural occurrence. Well,
I mean, you're also now like getting to like the dumber side, the wellness side, where it's like even if it's like say vitamin C from orange juice versus vitamin C that was generated in a lab, somehow that those are different, even though they are literally the same molecule. And
yeah,
although you get ascorbic acid in half and half of each isomer anyways, but which only half of the ascorbic acid is going to be vitamin C.
right.
But it's like, or if you can't pronounce the word, pronounce it, don't eat it. And it's like dihydrogen monoxide. What? That's a scary word, apparently. Yeah, it's that kind of. I need to finish both Fluss and Frem's uh, theses because they very much will play back into their takes in Prometheus and Gaia, so I can go back to that. But it's basically back to that again, right?
Yeah, yeah. I always circle back to Harrison's um, dissertation and his and Frem's book that basically puts out the call for a socialist future, which of course we're careening toward naturally. Eh, not really.
I mean, we got accelerationism without any of us, any of the accelerationists doing it.
Accelerate. See, I always the accelerationist label always seemed to be a little too academic to me, and
Yeah.
I even helped a comrade back in the day write an article called "We Are Not Accelerationists" to be published in the Socialist Workers uh, the Socialist Worker paper for the ISO. And now I look back on that and I'm like, look, okay,
But I'm
th
thinking about,
this idea that the effects of an accelerationism uh, can somehow be individually located among us that you know it's a little like trying to refute Marx's statement about how individual workers or capitalists are only representatives of capital or of labor, right? And so if you're individualizing, these effects are saying, no, you're doing this, so you're helping, like, that's not how it works. Like,
Although we can, to a certain extent, say the current failure rate that's happening can be pinned on one person predominantly.
well, well,
That's
sure,
a, but that's
sure.
not a common occurrence, is it?
Right, right. But also, I tend to I tend to strongly refute the idea of the great man
Yeah.
theory
Well,
of
I
power.
guess me and
So
my not quite beyond pluralist with like multi-lens version of history, great man theory makes sense from the context of also the great from like I guess like a Hegel like guy's view of history where the holes open up and it's just a great man are put in those positions because the hole needs to be filled. So the great man is a consequence, not a cause, basically.
Well, if you're going to apply it to Trump, there's a number of
or
lot of Trump-like figures around the world now.
Yeah.
well,
It's
or
what's
is
going
it
to
both?
yeah.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
if you're truly dialectical, that's only one side. That's one-sided thinking, Kyle. You're you made the classic mistake, one-sided thinking.
Well,
You're either too idealist or you're too materialist. Okay, I'm kidding.
I know, but it's like that's the more common thing because there's more movement through history than there is people, specific men. So it's predominantly one way, although it does go the other way too.
It's it look, so like there's anarchists. I saw Doug's quote from Serge today or yesterday, and in which Serge opens up by saying that the Russian Revolution occurred spontaneously, and it's one of those things that Trotsky would have immediately scoffed at. So like the great man theory of history, I think is kind of like that, sort of like, and he showed up and stuff happened. And to me, that's just the show. That's the shine. That's what we see. But what built up that image in order to set off all of those effects was, a series of, slow, incremental steps that exploded at the end and looked spontaneous, but really,
That's why I
um,
like not the. That's why I do like kind of the multi-view because of history, not since they're all different moments looking at the same process through different essentials, which can come together to form a bigger picture.
it's one of those things when I think about that bread line that exploded into the February Revolution, like it was just another day, and if you just zero in on that, like, one event and say, how could a bread line have caused this? Well, again, it wasn't just the bread line. It was all the people who were shot on the crossing the river over to the Tsar's palace in 1905. It was Stolypin's crackdowns, in the intervening years. It was all the anarchists blowing up the previous czars. All of this stuff sort of eventually added up to a greater break. And anyway, uh, sorry, okay, going back to the book. Let's see, bulbs. Man, he goes on for
Yeah.
about a page about bulbs. Jesus Christ.
But yeah, I think
Okay.
it was like actually like being able to graft the bulb and put it in another plant and it still functions.
Yeah.
And I think there was somewhere else they talking about to that kind of grafting of like branches and stuff was where you can have a pear tree that has many different variations on the same tree just because it's different branches.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it's kind of like this interesting thing where kind of the whole is the parts of the whole, but the parts carry the whole in some form. That you can, what was it? Yeah, you can like cut it off, put part of it on the ground, and it will turn into another plant, whole plant.
Yeah.
Kind of a lot of ones, or even like turning a tree upside down, and the roots become branches and vice versa. It's capable of it's each part is capable of forming the part that it needs, and it's capable of shifting to what it needs to be.
Yeah.
That's
It's
why I feel like a lot of this ends up ultimately being describing.
yeah. Yeah, and he keeps referencing Goethe. So he says, accordingly, Goethe, with
Yeah,
his great insight into nature, has defined the growth of plants as a metamorphosis of one and the same formation. His work, The Metamorphosis of Plants, which appeared in 1790, has been treated with indifference by botanists who do not know what to make of it, just because it contained the exposition of a whole. And there's a note down here. Okay, there we go. The going forth of the plant from itself into several individuals is at the same time a total structure, an organic totality, which in its completeness has a root, stem, branches, has root, stem, branches, leaves, blossom, fruit, and of course also posits a difference in the plant, which we shall develop in the sequel. But what Goethe aims to do is to show how all these different parts of the plant are a simple, self-contained basic life, and all the forms remain only outer transformations of one and the same identical fundamental nature, not only in the idea, but also in their existence, so that each member can quite easily pass over into the other. A spiritual transient adumbration, that's a great word, of forms which does not attain to qualitative fundamental difference, but is only an ideal metamorphosis in the material aspect of the plant.
identity that is that abstract identity.
Yeah,
Which is why he references difference for the next
yeah,
paragraph.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. Here you go. The parts exist as intrinsically the same, and Goethe grasps the difference between them merely as an expansion or contraction. It is well known, for example, that trees have been planted upside down, the roots up in the air, and the branches and twigs in the ground, with the result that the former put out leaves, buds, blossoms, etc., and the latter have become roots. Double flowers, e.g., in roses, are nothing else but flowers in which extra nourishment has changed the stamens, uh, anthers, and in the wild rose, the pistil too, into petals, either entirely or still leaving traces of their See, I had no idea that this was possible, but there it is. You know what I mean? So he goes on and on about planting trees upside down. Um,
turning the
how the
tree on
fuck
its
long
head.
does he go on about this? Fucking shit. Sorry.
That's what I was saying.
In
320.
this way, yeah.
320.
Oh my God. Okay. Oh, I believe you. Okay,
But
so I'm
yeah,
gonna go down.
again,
Yeah, he just keeps going down, and
I thought there's a quote right there, just like at the very beginning. That's interesting. That the fructification is the supreme development of light in the plant. So that's
okay.
kind of it is the kind of part that the fruiting bud, I think, that eventually prevents the seed of actual like normal reproduction, separate from like the pollen.
Yeah.
That's what I'm getting out of that. Yeah, it's just like the small nugget in the big description is all. But
Hang on just a second. I need to take a phone call. I'll be right back.
okay, no problem. But yeah, I was going to saying as well, Jim, going through all this, it does read as kind of like going from the most, again, the most abstract to the most concrete, going from the simplest to the most complex, which still shows that there's a lot of these relationships between this transitional aspect where each component's able to take on a different purpose for the entire plant.
Yeah, but in this point is the relationship between the parts and the whole in plants versus later on when he discusses animals. The relationship between parts and whole in animals is quite different from plants.
Right. Because I guess you can now. They have been able to like have like part transplants, but that starts getting into the different now with the immune system differences. But
Yeah,
it how very difficult that was to do over the lifespan of humanity versus plants, where it's just very straightforward.
Yeah, yeah, we can do organ transplants, but it's very complicated because
Hmm.
you gotta give the patient drugs to suppress the immune response
Which,
to the transplant transplanted organ.
well, now I'm thinking about that. I'm wondering which is the first innovation that's going to work. The one where they're able to kind of redo the organ to make it better match, or just printing organs based off the person's DNA. But
It's the
this
next.
both are happening. I just don't know. I don't know which one's going to be functional first. Fruitification of modified contracts into so fruitification is a higher complexity to the petal itself. Okay, that's how logically this is going. Of course, I'm not going to touch the screen because I think he's needing it right now. Oh, and we are almost at 320. Yeah, a lot of Gert that's quoted. Uh,
I think he knew Goethe personally. Of
yeah.
course, Goethe was one of the great polymaths of that time, and you know, was writer, poet, philosopher, and a scientist. Nowadays, remembered mostly as a writer and poet, but here we see Hegel is interested in Goethe as a scientist.
At some point, I'll read more about Goethe, but I think I would need time for that. Yeah. Mm.
Goethe was a great Spinozan.
Interesting. Hey, by the way, Jim, did you see any more about that slop channel I mentioned about Spinoza that I
I
stumbled upon?
haven't looked at it yet, so
I clicked on one of the videos because it's like you can tell it's AI, TTS, and all this stuff. What I
yeah.
thought was interesting, they tried to make it look like somebody was speaking, so it's somebody dressed up speaking in cuts every so often, and I realized it's just like somebody they told to make Spinoza, but he's dressed modern. Like the whole thing is just straight up spin. Wow. I don't know if they're actually. They seem to be very much doing it as a atheist project specifically. I don't know how much of it's really correct on the philosophy, but I didn't bother diving too deep into that because you could tell even the content was AI written, so it would just hurt too much try to actually get anything out of it. Ugh. Hmm.
Well, one of the reasons why AI slop is getting so much traction is that besides being cheap to produce, it's
I mean,
most human running is slop as well. So
I mean, there were channels like Watch Mojo that were pretty much that pre AI, and so just you're just gonna get more people when it gets easier to do. But all right. Oh shoot, that reminds me. While he's waiting, we go back to that one channel I thought was in. Oh, that's right. The one I felt like it was podcast that got on a lot of like actual like scientists that really seem to be getting more to like fundamental of science and stuff, more philosophical.
yeah,
And then all of a sudden they had Shijak on. I'm like, okay. I keep misremembering how to pronounce his name for obvious reasons. Let me just go find the YouTube channel. Okay, there it is. Theories of everything. Yeah, Slavoj Žižek. Quantum mysticism is fake. I mean, that is,
that's true.
yeah. That's only a clip from it, though. Where's the actual quantum mechanics caught? Okay. Caught God unprepared. Some of these are just clips. Where's the full?
This is a great point.
Freedom, Buddhism, Quantum Physics, Consciousness is the actual title of the podcast. Or the actual episode. Let's see here. Just go over the summary because that's going to take me an hour and a half to listen to. So that definitely not right now. Zizek argues that true freedom is not the absence of necessity, but rather the moment one chooses their fundamental identity. He emphasizes the Hegelian notion that the fall from the state of perfection is what defines humanity. Just in that reality is essentially defined a gap or tension rather than a stat. Yeah. Again, this is summarized. I don't know how. Quantum mechanics to discuss historical ontological openness, specify questioning the popular idealist interpretations of quantum mechanics. Example, the consciousness creates reality, which he critiques. That self-awareness arises through confrontation with the. Okay, so he's still going through Hegel throughout this entire freaking video too. Okay, that's the first time I've seen Hegel on this channel. That, there's a positive.
Well, sounds like he was right about resisting idealist interpretations of quantum mechanics.
Yeah.
I mean,
Concerned.
that was a big issue in the Soviet Union when quantum mechanics was first was developing. there was a lot of resistance to quantum mechanics in the Soviet Union because of the popular idealist interpretations of it.
Yeah, that's the thing. I'm especially reading Hegel. I never could grasp it in the first place, but with Hegel, I'm like, that's why it made no sense. It's just sort of from the ether something comes. Like, it's just sort of, there's no concept of where it came from.
As far as quantum mysticism, it's alas, that's about as old as quantum mechanics itself, because some of the original quantum mystics were also among the founders of quantum mechanics, like Pauli and some of those guys. Wolfgang Pauli. He was a patient of Carl Jung, and he's one of the original quantum mystics as well.
Anti-subjectivism. See, I just asked because each YouTube video now has Gemini to ask questions based off transcript interpretation. Anti-subjectivism material. Zizek argues that true materialism does not posit a cosmic mind or unified harmonious totality where consciousness creates reality. Instead, he maintains that the lesson of quantum mechanics is precisely the opposite. That there is no underlying all-encompassing totality. I think again that's a subtlety lost probably in in the summary, but who knows? Quantum indeterminacy reflects an ontological openness rather than a secret mystical foundation. Uses the analogy of a video game background, space left undetermined by the developer to argue that quantum randomness points to the limits of our reality, not a deeper spiritual truth. Okay, yeah, this is a thing where a lot of subtlety is getting lost here, I'm sure. Using his reading of Hegel, Zizek argues that history and reality are open and necessity only emerges retroactively after a contingent decision is made. Mystical readings of quantum mechanics, in his view, ignore this radical openness, attempt to project a fixed, eternal meaning on reality that is fundamentally contingent. That's a lot more Hegelian, but okay. I'll have to actually watch this at some point then. Oh, Heidegger and historical awareness. Okay. Hegel's retroactive necessity. Hegel and a wired brain. Okay. Yeah. Man, that must be taking a while. All right.
This is a great point. So this is
Okay.
what
Why does that take forever? Nothing like looking at my YouTube recommends and seeing my own live stream. Like it's like the time I've had a YouTube recommend a video on the side that is the video I'm watching.
Yeah.
Guess he's still not back, huh?
Hey folks, sorry. I got caught up.
Okay. Let's check and make sure it wasn't too serious, but hey, just a long
Nope.
call.
Yeah, just a long call. Mm.
All right, apparently I
So,
was gonna say you
yeah,
know
so
that one
it goes through the fruit. Um and then you get down to this part. It says these are the main concepts of the Goethean metamorphosis of plants. Has ingeniously represented the unity of the plant as a spiritual conductor. But metamorphosis is only one side which does not exhaust the whole. We must also pay attention to the difference of the organs with which difference the vital process proper first makes its appearance. We must therefore distinguish two things in the plant: this unity of its entire nature, the indifference to a change of form of its members and organs, and B, the diversity of its development, the course of the vital process itself, an organization which is an elaboration up to the stage of sexual differentiation, even though this is only an indifferent and superfluous affair. The vital process of the plant is an independent process of the plant in each part. Branches, twigs, leaves, each possesses an entire independent process because each is also the whole individual. I remember I remember a line very early in the phenomenology of spirit where he specifically makes reference to uh, plants and how the seed all the way up to the tree is um, part of a you know
well,
part of a process. And I always thought it was just a neat metaphor, but he's actually being very directly illusory of Goethe's work
mm,
there. You know what I mean? Like it's like I know Goethe actually read the Phenomenology of Spirit, and Hegel, I think somewhere in his writings said that Goethe was the only person who understood what Hegel was even trying to do with his system, and everybody else just got it so utterly wrong. Whereas Goethe was like, yeah, I get it, I get
I
it.
didn't realize that was Goethe. That was the only one man understood me, and he didn't understand me. If that's even a real quote, but
Yeah, yeah. I think it was, uh, and I always found it kind of funny. Like, okay, it took a genius to understand a genius, but the the long and the short of it wasn't that both men were a genius. The long and the short of it was that he was able to put part of his system in the same language that Goethe understood from his own work, and so he was like,
yeah.
"Got it. All right, I got it." Which, which, which makes the number of books that you have to read to understand this damn book, or phenomenology of spirit even longer. You read some
Yeah.
Goethe and you understand it a little bit better.
Well, in
Yeah,
that philosophy in general, though.
yeah,
Also, I was
yeah.
going to say at that point because I was
Well,
looking.
especially German philosophy.
I was also yeah the we were talking because there's that one channel I thought was interesting podcast I've seen on and off. It's like they're kind of getting a little more into the philosophical side of science and actually trying to get things down. And so somebody finally brought in Hegel very explicitly into the channel. Can you guess who that was they brought on? Schreiber and Zizek? I mean, he wasn't inaccurate in a lot of the things I see from the basic skimming of it, like complaining about,
Yes.
quantum mysticism and such and Hegel,
Yeah,
but I haven't watched it yet.
yeah. I would take it with a massive grain of salt. Oh,
See, at least it's the first actual mention of Hegel I'm aware of on that whole channel.
yeah.
But yeah, I figure it's only we're kind of related because that is getting into a philosophy of nature as well, because it is the same thing when we get to the same thing Hegel complains about scientists do, and they mysticize or idealize things or one in a one-sided way.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah, so you have the unity of its nature as well as the diversity of its development. And really, if you think about it, this describes not only the plant, as Hegel puts it, not only its change, but also its differences, but the whole of his system. You know, if you put too much emphasis on the whole and not so much on the part, you're missing one side of the equation, and vice versa.
Also, too much. Oh, I guess it's just in the same way, too much on what it is and not how it's different.
Yeah,
It's again, it's the same thing, whole and the part, right?
yeah, yeah. And so
Difference.
and so he says, um, the okay, so he says the vital process of the plant is an independent process of the plant in each part. The plant's vital process is thus complete in each part because the plant is particularized through and through without the process having already differentiated itself into a number of different processes. Consequently, the process of the plant as an imminent differentiation appears both in its beginning and in its end product only as a development of shape. In this respect, the plant stands midway between the crystal of the mineral sphere and the free animal shape. For the animal organism has the oval elliptical form in the crystal, the straight line form of the understanding. The shape of the plant is simple. The understanding is still dominant in the straight line of the stem, and altogether in the plant, the straight line is still preponderant. In the interior of the plant are cells, in part like those in a honeycomb, and in part elongated, and then fibers, which it is true do intertwine in spirals, but then spontaneously resume their linear form without developing inwardly into a rounded shape. Uh, he's losing me on some of this botany stuff. So, um, blah 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 blah. He goes
Kind of
down and down and down.
showing where the identity kind of continues along is how to take
Yeah,
that.
yeah. So, um, yeah, and the plant's juices,
There's
water, etc., citric acid, so on and so forth. It's not quite chemically blood yet, but it's kind of doing the same thing as far as what it's supposed to transport among the cells, so on and so forth. And then he breaks off from that and he says the process, which is vitality, although a unity, must no less explicate itself as a triad of processes. Again, a triad with Hegel is sine qua non.
and here's the part that was weird is the 346, 346A, because I guess they decided to split that up for this book.
Yeah,
Oh yeah, because it makes sense because he's introducing something and then it just goes
yeah.
off.
Well, A, B, and C, or A, B, and gamma, I guess.
Alpha, beta, gamma, yep.
Yeah. However, he decided to put that. So let's look at the overview. He says, in the process of the plant, which splits up into three syllogisms, the first, as already stated, is the universal process, the process of the vegetable organism within itself, the relation of the individual to itself, in which the individual destroys itself, converts itself into its non organic nature, and through this self destruction comes forth into existence, the process of formation. Secondly, the organism has its other, not within it, but outside of it as a self subsistent other. It is not itself its non organic nature, but it finds this already confronting it as object, an object which it seems to encounter only contingently. That is the specialized process towards an external nature. Hmm. The third is the process of the genus, the union of the first two, the process of the individuals with themselves as genus, the production and the preservation of the genus, the destruction of the individuals for the preservation of the genus as production of another individual. The non-organic nature is here the individual itself. Its nature, on the other hand, is its genus. I'm busy, honey. Ask mom. All right. But this too is also an other, its objective nature. In the plant, these processes are not so distinguished as they are in the animal, but coincide. And this precisely is the source of the difficulty in expanding the nature of the vegetable organism. Okay, so we're getting into rather juicy territory here. Plant juices, according to Hegel. So, yeah, so there you go. So he goes into the process of formation for A. How far down does he go with that? Geez.
Oh,
Hang on just a second. So,
yeah, it's happening again.
which I mean, it's fine.
Yeah, it's of his
he's recapitulating the science of botany,
right.
which is great. Giving me a whole. Okay, so, ooh, this is interesting. So, it said 346A, and then it didn't say 346B. It just sort of. Ooh, that's interesting.
Nah,
Give me just a second. I'm sorry. So
that's
there's
fine.
346.
Well, I'm trying to help you with that. Sorry. 46A.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, sorry. So, um, what were you saying, Kyle?
Oh no, I was just trying to think because it's when you go all the way to like the 346 page, 337 actually. I think that's where we're at for that. Is that just one whole? Because that looked like one giant addition, and then you got to the next paragraph.
Well, it was 346A, and then you get to 347. So
Correct.
I'm still looking through for 346B, and it never actually showed
No,
up as a paragraph
like I said,
marker.
I think it doesn't.
Yeah,
I think
it doesn't.
that's what I'm saying. I think 346A is because they split up 346 to define it as a separate section.
Got it. I got it. Okay,
Because
that
I already
makes
did
sense.
what you're looking through.
Yeah. Okay, so 346A, he
Uh,
says the inner process of the plant's relation to itself is, in keeping with the simple nature of the vegetable organism itself, immediately a relation to an outer world and an externalization. On the one side, it is the substantial process, the immediate transformation, partly of the absorbed nutriment into the specific nature of the plant species, and partly of the internally transformed fluid into organs. On the other side is self mediation. A, the process begins with the simultaneous outward direction into root and leaf and the inner abstract direction of the general cellular tissue into woody fiber and vital vessels, the former likewise being related to the outer world and the latter containing the plant's internal circulation. Okay, so Hegel, I don't know if microscopes were a thing
They
back
were.
Kinda,
in
yeah.
this period, but he seems to be reflecting, the external world of the plant and the internal world of the plant here. So, okay, there we go. Uh, um, so preservation of the plant in the self-mediation aiding process is B, growth as production of fresh formations, diremption into abstract self-reference, into the hardening of the wood, which goes as far as petrification in bamboo and similar plants, and the other parts, and into the bark, the permanent leaf. The unification, Zusammennehmen of the moments, which means uh, taking together, of self preservation is not a union of the individual with itself, but the production of a fresh plant individual, the bud. Okay. What's up, bud? So, so we've got a intermediate paragraph before we go into like 1A, 2A, 3A kind of thing.
Yeah, and
So,
I feel like the alpha, beta, gamma is going to be each of its own sections later.
yeah. Yeah, I think so. So we're at 9:04, and
Yep.
we can probably say that we're at 3:22, and we can go on to um a later page because there's quite a lot of stuff without exhaustively reading it all through. I mean, that Zusatz just goes on till 336. So if either of you caught that, 336 is
Yeah.
where we'll read to.
To the first
But
reading the one paragraph section.
yeah, yeah, just that whole Zusatz underneath 346A. And we'll reconvene next week. Sound good?
Yep.
All right, comrades. You have a great week.